Why, hello there, and welcome to our podcast. I'm Bill.
I'm Curtis.
We are father and son, and together we are
Your Geekdumb Prophets.
Geekdumb Prophets. Hey, how's it going, Curtis?
It's going pretty good today.
Today it's going good. That means yesterday not so good, or
No. It comes and it goes. You know.
up and down, up and down.
Oh, of
up
course.
And down.
Life just has a series of cycles.
It is. Well, it's been a little bit since we've had a chance to chat here. We've been busy in our lives, huh?
Oh, definitely. It's it's been a crazy few weeks, at least since the last time they recorded. So,
That's right.
however long ago that was.
It's been almost 2 months. Sorry, guys. I've been, the faithful lights. We've been trying to get this out once a month. Next one will be much closer to this one. But hey, speaking of being busy and things, guess what I did this weekend?
What'd you do?
I went to a Comic-Con.
Oh,
Nerded
of
out.
course.
And I was able to get an autograph. Dun, 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 dun,
Another
dun,
one
dun,
to add to the collection.
I believe I got to double check, but this is Taylor Gray. He played, or he's the voice of Ezra Bridgers in Star Wars Rebels, and this is number 59, I believe.
Ooh,
I got to double check.
You are 10 away from that magic number.
What's the magic number? 59. Oh. Whoa! How's that to start our day right there?
Of course! It's the best way
favorite,
to start things.
It's Bill and Ted's favorite number.
It's 420 and 69. They're funny.
69! That's right. Well, I got an autograph here to go with my collection. Back here, I don't know if you can see some of those, but those are the ones that I've gotten that were just voiceovers. So now I have Zeb, Ezra, and I got Hera Syndulla's, and Princess Leia's, and of course Ashley Eckstein, but I've had hers since Clone Wars.
Yeah, but you got hers signed in, what was that, 2010? That was at the Empire. Empire. Yeah, that would have been 2010 is whenever she had launched her universe, and that was the first time that we met her.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, because we've seen her a couple times.
Uh-huh.
But I got her autograph. I got her autograph back when she wasn't very expensive.
Now she's through the roof to get her to sign her stuff. And that was still whenever she was on, she would go to the floor because she was also running the Her Universe booth.
That's right. She was running her own booth.
Yeah, so she was either signing autographs or at her booth. At her booth, you could stop and talk with her, and it was fun.
That's right. And that was back in the day when regular common autographs were only $25, $30. Now regular people are 60, 50 or 60. They're actually a larger name. I think isn't Hayden Christensen coming to Denver?
Yeah, he's going to be at every Fan Expo showing. Because they were just at MegaCon down in Orlando. He was there. He's going to be in Dallas, and he's going to be in Denver, and I believe he's going to be in Toronto.
Isn't he 180?
Something. I think he's 160, and then it's 185 for a photo.
Wow.
Oh, for those that don't know, Hayden Christensen is Anakin Skywalker from the
That's
prequel
right.
films.
Anakin Skywalker. Anakin Skywalker. The not the young Anakin Skywalker. Episodes 2 and 3.
Yeah.
And
the little one would be Jake Lloyd, which we've had his autograph since 2002. So
that's right. And episode 6 and Obi-Wan, Rogue One. Did he play him in Rogue One, or was that somebody else in Rogue One? I don't even remember if he played
for
him
Hayden Christensen.
Yeah.
No, he was not in the suit.
He was in Obi-Wan.
He was in Obi-Wan.
He was in Obi-Wan, but not Rogue One.
Nope.
Oh, that's another story. All right, so what have you been up to? Sorry, I jumped right into the con. What have you been up to?
Oh, I have been doing nothing except for reading the great and wonderful Chronicles of Conan the Barbarian. Because I have nothing else to do with my life at the moment except for work and read, and so that's what I've been doing. And I got so into it that I went and bought. Here's Volume 2.
I didn't know you got Volume 2.
Got Volume 2. Here's Volume 1. And then I managed to get a hold of a copy of Volume 4, so I'm needing Volume 3.
Oh, you did need volumes. Okay.
Yeah, I need
Well,
Volume 3. So,
I finally got this in the mail. They finally reprinted the original Secret Wars. This is way back in the 80s? No, 90s?
that would have been
91?
1980.
This was 80?
That's
Oh,
a
yeah,
Jim
it was.
Shooter story. He would have been
Hey,
editor in chief, and he wrote it.
hey, big shooter. That's right. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so they finally reprinted this. We'd never had this, so I have it on hardcover now.
Yep.
So I'm rereading it. It's been a long time since I read that. Since
Oof.
I was a young one. I think I was like 12 or 14 when that thing came out.
I think I was about that age whenever I finally got around to reading the original Secret Wars for the first time.
I was thinking, you weren't that age when it came out.
No, I was that
No,
age whenever one of my friends had a trade paperback of it, and I finally read it.
that's right. Well, I had a couple comments that people gave to me about our last podcast when we were talking about first appearances, and we used the picture of us dressed up as
Oh, yeah.
Obi-Wan and Anakin. Because
Yep.
I was 5 years old when the original Star Wars: A New Hope came out, and Curtis
I was
was 5 years
5
old when
whenever Phantom Menace
Episode
came out.
One. That's right. It was a moment. It was a moment. I loved it.
It was a
Yeah.
moment.
So, did you also saw? I'm just gonna mention this since we were kind of talking about things we've been doing. Give me your review, Super Mario Brothers.
Super Mario Brothers. Okay,
I
real
haven't seen it
quick
yet.
review.
So I don't know. Maybe we can make this a new segment or something. That okay? Curtis's reviews with pop culture movies. I don't know. We'll come up with a
Pop culture reviews.
pop
Pop
culture
culture
reviews.
reviews with Curtis. That's how this goes. Well, okay,
Ding
so
dong
I did
ding.
see the Super Mario Brothers movie. I saw it last
Okay.
Sunday because it did come out Easter weekend, and I
Ooh.
mentioned Easter weekend for specifically about the topic that we are going to be talking about today.
Ooh. Foreshadow.
But foreshadow. But in
Prophetic.
regards, I know, right?
Not
And some may
pathetic. Prophetic.
prophetic. Some may say it's almost borderline messianic.
True.
But no,
True.
I did go and see the Super Mario Brothers movie. And as an avid Nintendo fan, as I do have my Nintendo Switch sitting right here with Mario Cherry Red controllers, I did see the Super Mario Brothers movie. And
Okay.
I gotta say, it's a fun film. It
It's a
really
fun film.
is.
Okay.
It is a fun film. It is more directed towards kids being between the age of 8 and 12.
I was gonna say what age of kids, because I'm still a kid.
8 and 12. It's pretty simplistic, the entire plot of the film, which it's Mario. It doesn't need to be overly complicated. If you overly
That's
complicate
right.
it, we get the Super Mario Brothers from 1992, who, let's face it, is nowhere near
That was a
a top
weird
tier
movie.
film.
It's a
Yeah,
weird
exactly.
movie.
But I will say, if you are a Mario fan, you will thoroughly enjoy the movie.
Okay.
Your basic, run of the mill normie like yourself. Whenever it comes to Mario, it's the movie's going to be fun to watch, but you'll walk out of it not remembering much about the film.
Okay, because I got to make a point. Because since we did our last podcast, or just before we did our last one, I got a chance to go see Curtis over and visit with him directly. Woohoo! It's great to
Oh,
see my son again. But we were playing Super Mario Kart and
oh, Mario Kart Double
played
Dash.
played for years. And as we're going, this is as Curtis was calling me, referring to me as a normie. And I like playing Mario because I like to play with the kids. I like to play with them. But for those who've ever seen the controllers, you all know that there's a little button mash up at the top, right and left. Never knew you put those to skid around corners. So like you're drifting, like in Fast and Furious. Never knew, ever. You know how long I've been playing that game? How old are
For
you? 29?
at least 20,
At least 20
at least
years.
29 years,
Because I
because
didn't let
the
you
original
get
the
a.
original Super Mario Kart would have come out for the Super Nintendo in 1995. It was at the tail end.
Curtis is like talking like, "Oh, you just skid." And I'm like, "How do you skid?" And he's explaining to me, "No wonder I lost all the time, like all the time. I'm thinking this is just a simple race car game. Just push the gas, little brake. Didn't know you
Nope.
could drift ever.
Nope. It's an extremely technical racing game.
So for all
S-
those nerds or geeks or parents of nerds and geeks, those little buttons at the top are for drifting because Mario Kart is making its comeback. Super Mario, all those. Play with your kids. Do it. Top buttons. Drift.
Drifts. Well,
Thanks
whenever
for.
it's really good to know this, especially if you're a parent of a child with the current Mario Kart 8 Deluxe for the Switch, because I mean that game is the third highest selling Nintendo Switch game right
Already.
now. Oh, it's
That's
been the third highest selling since they re-released it back in
that's insane.
2018,
Super Mario is still
2017.
that big. Still
Oh
that
yeah.
big.
Oh
The
yeah.
number one grossing animated film from opening weekend.
Yep.
Over 385 million.
Domestic.
Domestic was
Mm.
no international. Domestic was 205 something like that.
Domestic was 205, international was 385.
Yeah,
The numbers from this weekend placed the movie at $686 million dollars for an international opening, and it still hasn't opened in Japan and Korea.
phenomenal. And people, I talked to some people. They're like, "Oh, I think I'm done with Chris Pratt." I'm like, "Well, obviously, not the rest of the world is not. They're
No, no.
it's still Lego. I mean, yeah, it beat out Lego Movie. I was like,
I think the highest grossing at this point was actually technically Minions Rise of Gru.
"Oh, really? Okay,
Yeah, which is another Illumination film. So
yeah." Well,
Illumination does what Disney don't.
I want to go see it. We're hopefully they're gonna take Sarah's nephews and nieces. I want to take them.
Oh, you'll have
So,
fun. You'll have fun.
well, it just looks
I
creepy if
had
I go in there by
I
myself.
do have a quick story about that. So whenever I went in to go see the movie,
Oh,
um,
wait a minute, you did go by yourself. Never mind.
I did go by myself. It's Mario. I went by myself for Sonic. What was even funnier, whenever I went to the first Sonic the Hedgehog movie, I saw hardly any kids, but I saw a ton of couples there seeing it for Valentine's Day.
Oh,
It came out on Valentine's Day. So
just like
that was
Deadpool.
just like Deadpool. It was a Valentine's
Deadpool.
Day movie.
Those were
But
Valentine's movies.
anyways, quick story about what about my experience of going to see the movie. So I went and I sat down, and there was this family sitting down right next to me, and I went to the IMAX, of course, because I'm like, if I'm gonna go to the movies, I'm gonna splurge and spend money on going to the largest screen possible to see it.
Or a giant cartoon.
For a
Okay.
giant cartoon, exactly.
Big,
I am
cartoon.
gonna boost those sales numbers for this film.
Let's
I am all about it. So
go.
I go
It's
in,
Luigi.
I go in and sit down for this film, and there's this family right there, and I sit down in my assigned seat, and right next to me is this little girl who's probably about somewhere between 4 and 6, just sitting there, and the Little Mermaid trailer comes on for the very first for the new live action Little
Live action
Mermaid,
one.
and she goes, "Oh, Little Mermaid." Just kind of sits there, watches the trailer for a minute, and goes, "This looks boring. Where's Mario coming on?" Turned to her mom and said, "I want Mario." I couldn't. I was trying so hard not to laugh. I was like, "Yep, even
That's
you've
perfect.
lost even your core audience, Disney.
Even the
That
core
this
audience.
this trailer that you tried so hard to inspire this little girl to come and see this movie. She just saw it for a quick second, went, "Oh, Little Mermaid. Where's Mario? I'm not. I
Where's
don't want
Mario?
trailers. Where's Mario?"
Forget about the princess, the Little Mermaid.
And she was
Well,
so excited. She was so excited while watching the movie, though. Like for every scene, she was just like, "Yeah, Mario."
well, that's kind of along with the topic today because we're going to be dealing with like fulfillment of prophecies and specifically, was that prophetic to or anticipation of what's going to happen? We are going to be talking about
Disney's
today.
slow downturn into absurdity.
That's right, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
We are going to go into the concept. Ready for this? Drum roll. The Messianic persona. Big word. Yeah. So the idea of like when you think of the Messianic, of the Messiah, the coming of the chosen one, the coming of a prophecy, fulfillment of a prophecy, that is constantly written throughout literature, historically through fantasy, and now we see it obviously through pop culture and subcultures of video games and stories and comics. And so the concept here that we're going to be talking about, we're going to give this kind of a base here, is the concept of the allegory. So an allegory is a story, poem, or picture that can be interpreted to reveal a hidden meaning. Typically, it's a moral or political one. So, we think of allegories like stories that would, throughout history, the biggest one would be Pilgrim's Progress, that each character actually represents a different type of, not emotion, or it represents a character of a personality of a person. And so, similar to like the original stories of like Aesop's fables and
Hans
Grimm's fairy
Christian
tales.
Andersen.
Yeah, yeah,
Grimm's fairy tale, Hans Christian
yeah. They're
Andersen,
different.
all the old fairy tales that we still somehow have managed to integrate into our culture in some way, shape, or form, even if we don't necessarily tell the original tale as they were told to children of 16th century Germany.
Like the original story of Cinderella. Remember the first time I told Brooke about that? She was just like, Brooke is my daughter, Curtis's sister, and just horrified, like, what? They did what to their feet? They cut their heels off so they would fit in the shoe? So they were originally told stories to like kind of help scare children into going to sleep. So we're talking a little bit different than just those Grimm's fairy tales. This is more like the Pilgrim's Progress, or specifically, we're going to be talking about some characters that we know or have seen that are pretty popular nowadays. There's movies, there's stories written on them, and the whole idea of the Messianic persona. To quote a movie that so much I love, Jesus, no, it's Hoops. I had to bring them in. That's right.
Oh, One Crazy Summer.
You gotta look those up, people. John Cusack quote. Gonna be one hidden
Jesus!
here.
No, it's Hoops!
It's Hoops! It's Hoops! Alright, so, let's start with an example of a messianic persona. So, Curtis, gonna give this to you. What do you think? Who is one of the biggest archetypes, or the idea of the type of Christ that you can think of through comic books?
Well, I mean, we can go off of what is now considered classic American literature, which is Superman.
He's classic American literature now.
He is, well, it's not even classic American literature, it's an American myth. It is American mythology.
Oh, nice. Oh, mythology. Yeah. That's a good way to think about.
There's now been plenty of papers written about the American myth of Superman.
Yeah, that's true. He's been, amazing. We talked about first appearances the last podcast. He's been around. What was it? Let's see if we can remember. 1927.
1939.
39. Not 69. 1939. 1939. All right. So obviously most of our viewers have heard of Superman. If you haven't heard of Superman, Super Nanny. It's time to wake up. It's time to realize, there's a lot. There's Lois and Clark. What's the most recent one? Is Superman and Lois.
Superman and Lois.
And Clark. Superman.
Smallville.
Adventures in Superman.
Superman, the animated series.
Then all the Superman movies. The original ones were Christopher Reeve, of course, and then the newer ones that had the Man of Steel, and then now Henry Cavill. Is it Cavill or Cavill? Cavill. We'll go with Henry Cavill. Yeah. Thumbs up. We like that. It rolls off the tongue so much easier. All right, so give me some examples that you can think of that he has that persona, the messianic persona, meaning that he's building up to an allegory of who Christ is, or who the Messiah will be.
Ooh, well, I mean, the biggest one is Superman came from an entirely different planet other than our own. He is an alien, technically speaking, and how he got here, was via a spaceship as a little baby while his people were being destroyed.
By his people. Okay, like okay. So I'm going to compare this with another type of Christ that we see in the Old Testament of
Mm-hmm.
Moses. Moses is again not straight. Allegories are allegories. They're you take parts of this. It's very difficult to find one that's straight allegory all the way through. But
Mm-hmm.
Moses, similar, was put into a little basket wrapped in swaddling clothes that he was put in a basket and he went to a people that was not his own. He was of Jewish descent and he was picked up by Pharaoh's daughter and was raised as an Egyptian citizen.
He was. Well, and he got sent away because his people, the Hebrews at the time, were being like all of the firstborn, all of the newborn males were being sacrificed, as
True.
Pharaoh was
Yeah.
afraid of what was going that the Hebrews were going to rise up, and potentially conquer Egypt at the time. So he was fearful of what was going to go on. Now, this is very much in relation to Superman. What was going on with his home is he was sent away because Krypton was in the process of its own self destruction. You start reading into why Krypton ended up, having issues, and why the core of the planet went nuclear and basically destroyed the entire planet and wiped out all of the Kryptonians. And Superman was the lone survivor, and he was sent away to be a beacon of hope to other
Speaking of hope,
worlds.
the big S,
Hope.
hope. That's right. That's what the S stood for those others did not know. The nerd S does not stand for Superman.
Well, the original Kryptonian S, as it was written.
Stood
Yes.
for hope. He stood for hope. That yeah, very similar to like how Jesus, just like Moses, they were Pharaoh trying to kill off all the babies. Then when Jesus was born, same thing. That Pilate was, or Herod, not
Herod at the
Pilate. Ooh,
time.
Herod was afraid that there was going to be this great rebellion and the Jewish people, the Hebrews, would take over again. So he sought out to kill all babies 2 years and older, which also would explain, for those who don't know, that the wise men actually probably started their journey at the birth of Christ or when he was at the conception of Christ, that it potentially took them 2 years to find Jesus. And so that's why, Herod was, we want to kill all babies 2 and under, not just newborns,
Mm-hmm.
just the boys. So the race could not carry on. All right. Anything else with Superman?
Ooh. Anything else with Superman
I'm thinking,
specifically?
I was thinking like the, oh, well, yeah, you could go with how he was, truth, justice, and the American way. He was all about justice, doing the right thing.
He was all about doing the right thing.
Yeah,
Yep,
even in the
bringing hope to a world that may not have had any. And he was raised with good morals, a good sense of grounding, and that way, as his powers were developing, he had a a pillar to lean on to understand how he should be utilizing his abilities and his what was granted to him, which was to help people. It wasn't to conquer.
yeah, he had Jonathan and Martha raising him well, whereas like Moses, type of Christ, he was raised by Pharaoh, not probably the best of examples for his life, and but
He
even
did see
Moses in
he
his
did see his own like the abilities that he could have, though, with whenever he killed the Egyptian and he fled.
yeah,
He
yep,
he realized that that wasn't something that he was going to be able to live up to. And
yeah,
Superman, if he was in an entirely different situation, which they did do a storyline like that called Superman Red Sun, where he did not land in Kansas, Middle America, and was raised by two dirt poor farmers. He landed in communist Russia and was raised as a commissar.
that's right. Well, they redid that story in Supergirl, the TV series too. They cloned her or
Mm,
whatever and
mm, mm,
made
we're
her.
not we're not going to talk about that adaptation.
We're not talking about the
No,
WBs. It
no.
started off great. Melissa Benoist is fantastic. She's beautiful, wonderful, but it just got weird
You
after
you
about the
have a
third season.
you have a drawing of her right there in the back.
I do.
Yep, that one.
Specifically, Supergirl of Melissa Benoist. Supergirl. My favorite.
Mine's still
Okay.
that one. So
Yeah, Michael Turner's.
the Michael
He,
Turner.
that's right. Well, yeah, because even you think of Superman, like people who feared him were afraid of him because he was so powerful. And similar to the Hebrews, they were actually his own, the people they were kind of afraid of Moses after he killed them. Like, okay, what are you going to do to us? And then the Egyptians themselves, they came back. And, when the seven plagues were happening and then he brought down the snake, they began to fear him as well because it was all powerful. So the idea of this type of Christ comes into role playing, that even like Superman started his ministry when he was 30 because he was in the Fortress of Solitude for 12 years, and that Jesus started his ministry later in life, such as that as well. So there's connotations that are written into history, and so it's easy for people to read some of these stories and make these connections with an
Mm-hmm.
allegory. And that, I believe, is done on purpose. For one, it becomes memorable for people, but secondly, it also leaves an impact of, for what I believe is that the story of Christ has culminated in every culture through their historical works, through literature, through even as what we come in today now of our pop culture and our subcultures. It's an important part of the stories. So, there's an aspect that we'll mention specifically. One of the biggest parts of Superman with the Messianic persona is that there is a death and a resurrection. So, with Superman, huge. All those issues in the 90s
It
when
was
the death of
so
Superman,
large it made headlines to the
it
point
was
where it was
huge.
everywhere. You had to buy a copy of The Death of Superman. I did have,
Somewhere.
yeah, me and my Uber driving ways. I did have a passenger a couple weeks ago where we were actually talking about this particular story, and he grew up
Mm-hmm.
specifically around whenever this story was being published. And he didn't have a whole lot of comic book stores around him. He had to go to about 4 or 5 different stores, and finally his brother actually found him a copy of that polybagged issue of the actual Death of Superman, because the cover of the book had a spoiler, and so they had to put it into a poly bag to where you couldn't see the cover of the issue and what
With
was
the
going to go
gravestone and all
on.
that.
Yeah, well, this was it the gravestone one, or was it the one where it was Superman wrapped in the
Oh,
um
it could have been the wrapped one.
he was wrapped in the remainder of his cape as he was bleeding out, being held by Lois.
That's right, that one. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and then Aunt Marianne, my sister, she passed away last year, but her husband, he was a huge Superman fan. Huge. And in memoriam to him, we talked previously about going through his comic books and organizing to sort them all out. I took one of those of the actual, it was from that storyline. I think it was the actual resurrection one when he comes back, that it had that plaqued and memorialized for her husband, because that was his favorite character. His favorite superhero was Superman. So
Oh,
definitely,
that's right. That was the end of the reign of the Superman story arc that
yep.
followed, where they were
There was
trying to.
Bizarro. All these different
There
things were
was there
taking
was
his place.
Bizarro, there was Steel, there was Superboy, Vindicator, where these characters were trying to take on Superman's actual role within, being a protector of Metropolis. And in the background, it was kind of Superman trying to come back, the actual
Yeah,
resurrection of Superman. And it ultimately culminated in Superman being reborn, as
reborn. Yep,
he was reborn, and he ends the fighting amongst all of these impersonators. But it took Superman to end the fighting.
yep. Coming back from the dead. that
Mhm.
that messianic persona. Okay, so one of the that brings us into a kind of a segue into the next one with one of the greatest stories, I believe. I think still one of the next to the Bible is one of the best-selling stories to this day.
It is the most translated story, being The Hobbit.
Specifically, The Hobbit was the most
Hmm.
translated. That's right. That's what it is. So one of the biggest stories is the Fellowship of the Rings, the Lord of the Rings. This is rich in story, rich in allegory, like incredible if you really get into it and start to break it down and understand the allegory. Now, obviously, with Tolkien, he was not a firm believer in what they would call straight allegory. So there's not like one character that symbolizes all of these things.
He ultimately wanted to look at things not in an allegorical light, but within an applicable light. So whenever he was
Mm-hmm.
writing his particular stories, he had ideas of like almost eternal truths that existed, and he wanted to incorporate these stories to where they could be applied to anybody that read them.
Right. Well, and it's interesting for him is that he would swap the important points that he wanted to get across as far as like what you're saying, different character personality traits that we would want to personify, and so it rotated with the different characters. So the first one you think of is Frodo. Frodo. His main job was
He was the
basically
ring
the
bearer. He
yeah
bared the weight of the world
the weight of
upon
the
his
world.
literally around his neck.
Literally around his well, yeah, and again for listeners trying to understand this, the sin, the power, the one ring actually represents sin, the sin of the world, the sin of the weight of sin upon our lives, and the temptation of sin to go against what is good, what is right, and and with this whole idea of the Lord of the Rings, we're not getting into the crap that's out there on Amazon. We're dealing specifically with the original story of
The
and the
books are right
concepts.
there. They are right
Yes,
there.
the original stories, Lord of the Rings and the Fellowship of the Ring and the Two Towers and Return of the King. Mind you, all of these were originally written as one story in 1953, 54 when he wrote these, but because the cost of paper
55.
was too expensive, 55, cost of paper was too expensive, they actually had to split it into 3 books. So nowadays we would consider that marketing because it would keep bringing back more people. You're like, well, no, this is too good of a story. Let's split this into three. Kind of like what they did with The Hobbit,
Oh, with making 3 movies
the
whenever
the
it should have.
making 3 movies out of it, where they could have made it in one, maybe two, and then
Let's
uh,
keep it to 4 hours, please. It's not that long
yeah,
of a book.
and then they took all the stuff that was actually from other stories of Tolkien. Wasn't whatever. Let's get back to Frodo carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders, and then so the ring representing the great evil, what he was trying to throw away into the lake of fire. Hey, does that sound familiar from the Bible? What? What? Okay, the big example is that the you think of what's the oh the person that was trying to uh, constantly get the ring and what it did to his life and what it did for destroying the temptation that was always there was
Got him. Got him. Got him.
Gollum. That
Oh, poor
my
Smeagol.
precious
Oh, poor
poor
Smeagol.
Schmeagol. Yeah, it literally converted him, turned him into something that he was not, because the word says that there's pleasure in sin for a season, and that it was that temptation of when you go so far, then anybody who's been involved in any type of addictions knows that when you get to a certain point and it's like you got to reach that again, you got to take it to the next level to get that same type of euphoric experience or that high or whatever it may be. I don't want to say always addiction in a negative sense of we think of
Hey, whenever
alcohol
I
and
hear all kinds of people coming out of AA that have actually managed to, conquer their addiction, and one of the most key characters that they tend to reference as, kind of their point of inspiration and understanding what happened to them tends to be Gollum.
is Gollum. Oh, that's very good. I like that. And we won't even go into the personal examples. If you as you look behind both of our shoulders, I raised my son. His addictions, yes, they came from me. Sorry, Curtis. Sorry, Curtis. All right. So the next character that we can go into, as it flows with Frodo carrying the weight of the world, the next is a great example of Aragorn. He is the
Oh yeah.
culmination of all this. The third book, the Return of the King. He is the representation of Christ himself in this regard during this time, during this story, this part of the story. He was even presented in with the ring, with
And he
the
turned it away.
temptation. Yeah,
He
you
said
remember that in the
no.
movie?
He said no. The burden is yours,
The burden is yours.
but I will
Exactly.
help you carry it.
Yes. That
You
was a
have
great
my
representation.
sword
You have my sword. You have my axe
and
and
my
my
bow.
bow and my bow. That's right. Now, all the Lord of the Rings fans are getting excited right now.
Hey,
They
Return
turned
of
them
the
off.
King is in theaters next week for a limited time only.
I saw that. I was
Yeah,
like,
Thursday the
ooh,
19th.
I might go see that again. That
Mm.
that's that's a fantastic movie, especially on the big screen.
Well,
So
those movies
yeah,
should be released annually in theaters on a regular basis. Screw
they
the
should be.
anniversary.
It's
They should just be a regular showing.
all the time, all the time. So it's a moving moment, when Aragorn, he's presented with the ring and he just goes and he closes the fist of Frodo. In the movie, in the book's the same way. Of just think of this in Hebrews 4:15. It says that like Christ, for we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempered as we are, yet without sin. So that he was tempted, just like Aragorn, just like Christ, that he was tempted with these sins just like we are. Yet he turned it away and he was found without sin.
Hey, in regards to that, you can also look at the character of Boromir at the same time, who was very, very
Yeah.
tempted by the ring, but by the end of the story, did find redemption through letting the hobbits go.
Yes, which is actually going to be a topic
Which
for our
we'll get
next
into
podcast. That's
in our
right.
next episode. But
That's
it
right.
is in a good
The redemption
contrast
arc.
to Aragorn's response to being presented with the ring versus Boromir's, and kind of how, even though we do fall into temptation, we do still have a
Have a
path
chance.
towards redemption.
That's right. There's still that path. There's still the redemption arc. So yeah, going into the next section with that for sure. Well,
Mm-hmm.
even if you look at the concept of Arwen, Arwen represents the church, the body of Christ. That the body of Christ that they come to the wedding, and they marry into the wedding to the bridegroom who is Christ. And so Arwen marries the king. The return of the king is Aragorn, is the representation of Christ. So it's interesting how those just small subtleness of this allegory of the type of Christ comes into play.
Hey, but so we've talked about those two aspects, bearing the weight of the world and sin, and then coming back and redeeming the world for, the evil that it has done, and being there to, you know, now return upon the throne and be able to rule in a just way. But there's an aspect of the Messianic tale that we've not covered, and that is, we kind of touched on it with Superman. What about a death and a resurrection?
Ooh, the death and resurrection. So, best character. Some would argue depends who your favorite character is out of the Fellowship. Uh,
Oh, no, no, no.
the
He
one
is best. He is best.
he's best.
He
He's
is
best.
best. He is best.
Better than Samwise.
Uh, mm, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I know.
I gotta
Yeah,
go for it.
for different reasons. But Gandalf the Grey. That is correct. John chapter 1 verse 23 says he is sometimes considered like the messenger of God, similar to John the Baptist. John the Baptist would scream out. He said, "I am the voice of one crying in the wilderness, make straight the way of the Lord," as a prophet Isaiah said. So he is Gandalf the Grey is considered like the messenger, the one who's foretelling the story, the prophecy of the greater one to come, the one that would take away the sins of the world. And He's the guardian of the one
Well,
carrying the weight of the world.
it's not even just that he's the guardian and the one carrying the weight of the world, but he is also an angel of Iluvatar, who, Iluvatar within the realm of Tolkien, for those that do not know, is technically the one god, the one ruler. And there were several of them. You have Gandalf the Grey, you have Saruman the White, you have Radagast the Brown, you have the two blue wizards, and to some extent, Sauron.
Sauron himself, exactly. That there was a falling away of this. But what does Gandalf do? Gandalf the Grey sacrifices himself. That he
Within
actually
that
sacrifices
amazing
himself.
scene of "You shall not
You
pass" as he
shall not
faces the
pass.
demonic Balrog at this
There's not one
fiery
person that can say
inferno.
that. There's not one person who cannot say that without quoting that movie. You have to say
No,
it in that
no,
way.
even if you've never seen the movie, it's so prevalent in culture at this
It's
point.
even when you're mad on the highway and they're into construction and they're all coming to that merge and there's that one guy that's like whipping up in front and you move your car over a little bit to the left so they can't get by and I say it, you shall not pass. See, it's relevant for all ages and for every aspects of life.
It always is. It always is. But if there's one thing that you don't necessarily get from the film versus the books down
Mhm.
there, is that Gandalf, whenever he actually defeats the Balrog,
Gandalf?
Gandalf, um, Gandalf dies.
Oh yeah, literally dies.
He
Not just
literally
like
dies fighting the Balrog.
that's right. And he is resurrected and he becomes
Gandalf
oh,
the White.
Gandalf the White. Resurrected. So that brings us, like you said, Superman. The culmination of the Messianic tales, the Messianic persona, usually is culminated with a death and a resurrection. A death for a sacrifice for the good to come back into play. And the non-sinning one, the one who is found without sin, that sacrifices, gives all this up, but then is resurrected or redeemed. So next story, because we talked about Lord of the Rings,
You
we
got to talk
got
his.
to talk.
You got to talk about his contemporary.
It's contemporary. They were friends.
They
C.S. Lewis
were.
writing the Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I mean, that is, I've got to say, one of my favorite stories growing up. Read them to you as kids
Hey,
at
Brooke's
St.
reading
Paul's,
them to hers.
and Brooks reading them to our grandchildren, to my grandchildren as well. You don't have grandchildren, Curtis,
No, no.
but to your nieces, and reading them just as well to that this is such a storyline that pervades through the century. It means so much. It gives me goosebumps. But that's gonna be like a whole separate topic for Chronicles of Narnia, for sure. But specifically, let's jump to the end of that first book, uh, the persona of
Well,
this
before we
messianic
get
approach.
there with the persona of the messianic approach, if there's one thing that like kind of kickstarts the entire story for Chronicles of Narnia, it's little Edmund being a little bit of a dick.
That's right. There's always
All
one every crowd.
all for a really, really, pardon my language, shitty dessert.
For the Turkish delight. Now, well, and again, you got to look at this as an allegorical. The Turkish delight was representing sin. There was pleasure in that sin for a season. That
Hey,
he
whenever it comes to
wanted.
C.S. Lewis, it's very much on the nose.
That's right.
But it
He
still
wanted more
works.
of it. He wanted more of
Yeah.
it. He wanted more. That he wanted to come back, and he was willing to give up all that is good, all that is righteous, all that he knew. You know, think of it that way. These are things he knew were good. He knew was what was right, and he chose to go against that. Much like sin gets caught up in our own lives, we know the path. Some may know the right way. Some are presented with it, but he chose to go against that. So then, what happened is Aslan himself, the great son, the of the Emperor of the Sea, The
Well, and
emperor.
before we
Oh,
even
oh,
get into that little bit, I mean, going to Aslan specifically, one of the things that Edmund actually does is he commits to the White Queen, and there is a deep magic within the world that he can't run from that
right. It's there ever since the fall.
ever
If
since
we
the
look at
fall.
it in in our perspective, not just in the fantasy perspective, but in our world, that ever since the fall, where Adam and Eve sinned, they partook of the fruit, and because of the one man, sin has entered into the world, and constantly struggling and fighting against that. And yeah, correct. That Edmund represents that there was this deeper magic, the temptation, something that he committed to. The serpent came into the garden and tempted Adam and Eve, and Adam and Eve gave in to those temptations, and thus sin entered into the world through one man. But there's redemption through one man as well. And in this regard, in the storyline, there is redemption through Aslan himself, the great lion. Now, I don't want to, you think of the lion, um, not not
The
like the
Lion of
Lion King,
Judah.
not like the Lion King. I'm gonna insert the story real quick here, because this is a story about
Oh
my
no.
young boy that
Oh, it's this story. Oh
no
no.
one told me, no one told me that Mufasa dies. I watched Lion King thinking, oh yeah, it's all about Simba growing up, blah blah blah. But yes, Mufasa has to die. It's a Disney movie. They always kill off the parent. Every one of their movies, they kill the parents off, and
Hey,
so Mufasa
whenever
dies.
it's a working trope, I mean, everybody does it. It's all part of the hero's journey. It's all part
That's
of
right.
cutting your ties with that which you know, that which you're comfortable, even though it may be a discomforting event.
Still better than what they do now is just ruin the modern day parents, say what a terrible parent they are, and they ruin Willow. They do whatever.
Hey,
So at least
Mufasa
then
was
they just
great. Simba was a little shit. So,
yeah, they just killed him off. So Mufasa dies. Curtis is sitting there in front of the TV crying and crying and crying. Mufasa died. Mufasa died. And then Simba grows up, and Curtis is running around the house. He goes, "Oh, Mufasa's alive again. Mufasa's not dead." I was like, "Yes." I was like, "Yes." I don't want to have to deal with explaining death to you at this point. It was I don't even remember. I think you were like five, four
mm,
or five, and that came out,
three,
and I was three.
three.
That's right, because Brooke was just born. Yes, three.
Yeah.
So Curtis is like crying, and then Simba grows up, and he says, "Oh, Mufasa's alive." Yes. So, anyways, getting back. So not like that lion that actually did not come back from the dead. We have Aslan, the great lion, that he actually goes through this whole scene of a crucifixion, and he's bled out. He's beaten. He's worn. He's ridiculed. He's mocked, and he's
His
murdered,
fur, the big one, like
shaved.
Christ, his fur
Yeah.
is shaved. His great mane that denoted him as king is
Yep.
shaved.
Yep. Just like Christ, but it put on the crown of thorns, and he was stripped and lashed with 39 stripes, and all of this representation of the great sacrifice that Christ made for us because of that sin that entered into the world. That was his choice, like Edmund's. It was a choice that they made, because one of the greatest gifts God made us with is the gift of free will. That we have that choice. Obviously, it would have been great if we had chosen to follow him, but now we still have that choice, as you said, the redemption arc that we'll get into a little more specifically in the next one. But that Aslan was actually murdered, sacrificed, crucified, similar, of on the great stone table. But his response says it means that though the witch knows the deep magic, there is a deeper
Deeper
magic still,
magic.
which
If
she did
only she
not
had
know.
read the table.
That's right. If she'd only it's on the very table. That's right, on the very table that he was killed on.
Yeah.
But her knowledge only went back to the dawn of time, not before the creation itself. And so this whole concept is one of the most beautiful stories. I mean, brings you to tears reading that, watching it. And, whether you're watching the movies, whether you're watching the original cartoons with the soundtrack of the second chapter of Acts flying behind it, which was fantastic music. Matthew Ward was incredible. Little shout out to Matthew Ward. But this idea that Christ crucified, and yes, there's a death, but the important part of the messianic culmination of the messianic persona is that there's not just a death, there's a resurrection that happens. There's a turning away, there's something different. There was a plan from the get-go, like Aslan said, that she didn't understand before the creation of time, before the creation of this, that before the dawn of time, that there was a plan already set in place, much like Christ, that was already set in place, that he would be brought back, that he would be the descendant of Adam and Eve, that he would stomp on the head of the serpent and he would bruise his heel, because there would be as sin came into the world through one man, that life, resurrection, came back through one man as well. Jesus stood in the garden knowing that Judas was coming with the Roman soldiers to arrest him. He knew that he was going to be crucified. If you look at Scripture, Jesus actually fulfilled over 300 prophecies from the Old Testament regarding his messianic persona, regarding his coming as the Messiah. There's an important role throughout all of history, not just in the Bible, but as you can see, like I said, it plays an important role in every culture, in all of their stories, that there is some redeeming arc of someone that came to deliver them, comes to redeem them, to bring them out of a darkness. So Star Wars, they had Anakin Skywalker. They had all the prophecies that he was going, you were the chosen one, you were the chosen one. We had the prophecy was supposed to be coming true. Alora Dannon was the fulfillment of the destruction of the evil queen Beth Morda from Willow, for those who didn't know. Even Nietzsche himself said that if we killed a moral God, then moral atrocities would follow. So he believed that there was still even a need for the belief in God. John 11:25-26 says, he said, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live, and everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? This is the question he asked. So in reading these fantastic stories and hearing about these great stories of literature and throughout geek pop culture, why is it? This is what always, it bewilders me. Why is it that we are so quick to believe these stories? And we take them to heart. We take them into play. To believe in magic, to believe in resurrection, to believe in prophecies and prophecies being fulfilled. Yet we have an historical and empirical evidence of such a one, of all those prophecies being fulfilled in one embodiment of God's only Son, Jesus Christ. He did all these things that the stories told. He came to fulfill prophecy, to redeem his people, to bring life, and to die, and to bring resurrection. So he said, I am the vine, you are the branches. He said, no man comes to the Father except through me. I am the bread of life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the resurrection and the life. So he asked, and I ask you as a listener, or as a viewer, do you believe this? Many do, some don't. Doesn't mean that we still can't all get along. Even as he was saying before, that there's still a need for a belief. Even after this podcast, if you have outstanding questions, find someone to ask those questions to. Find a local church. Find someone that you know, that you grew up with, that was always there, that you knew they knew who Christ was, but you were always afraid to ask. Find that person. Seek them out. I'm going to end it with a quote here, that justice is getting what you deserve. Just like Superman, the truth, justice, and the American way. Justice is getting what you deserve. Mercy is not getting what you deserve. And grace is getting what you don't deserve. That is what Christ offers. That even if we've eaten of the Turkish delight, even if we have partaken and we've held that ring of power, we've craved that ring. We crave the Turkish delight. We've craved sin. With the addiction, whether it's that euphoric of going beyond, getting more, wanting the desire is there. That there is one man that I believe, that Curtis and I believe, that many others believe that he can redeem you from this and bring you through this. So this is something I haven't done with any of our podcasts, but we're going to take a moment right now, just a quick prayer. All right? Dear Lord, we thank you for this tremendous opportunity, Lord, especially around this Easter season, to be reminded of who you are and what you've done for us. Lord, to know that these great stories are stories that can pervade all of our cultures and all of our lives. But Lord, there's one story that's the most important, and that was the life, death, and the resurrection of your Son, of what you did on the cross for us, that there is redeeming power, that there's grace. Lord, if there's any here that are listening, Lord, that they may come to know you and come to know you in a deeper and more intimate way. And if they don't know you, God, may there be others that be a positive influence in their lives that will bring about an understanding of who you are and who you want to be in their lives. God, we thank you. In your name, amen.
Amen.
Amen. Curtis, as always, it's been a pleasure. Love talking about this stuff.
Oh, of course.
Nerds unite.
Always have.
Unite. That's right. Hey, and just remember, perspective is your prison or your passport. You guys have a great day. Great night. Good times.
See ya.